6 years after the real Ghostbusters went off the air came a sequel series with a name very much inspired by that mid to late 90s era, and shit still happens, and who you gonna call?
If there's something weird and it don't look good, who you gonna call? That's right.
I have less of a personal connection to Extreme Ghostbusters like I did the real Ghostbusters, but I was pretty interested in finally giving this series a fair shot. After the real Ghostbusters had its guts torn out by the Q5 debacle, I moved on to other shows, and when 1997 rolled around and Extreme Ghostbusters came on the air, I don't recall being too enthused. One part of that was due to the gimmicky extreme marketing, which wasn't something that really flew with me.
Extreme Ghostbusters! Can you handle it?
Then when I finally checked it out, I was greeted by the fact that the regular cast from any Ghostbusters had been replaced by a new team, so probably rather unfairly, I didn't bother with the show too often after that. Now, having watched through the entirety of Extreme Ghostbusters, I can say that the show is much better than I was giving it credit for, but I do have some mixed thoughts on it. Now, quite interestingly, a little over a year before Extreme Ghostbusters' release, it was going under the working title Super Ghostbusters, which is definitely a bit cornier than Extreme. This title was dropped really early on as well, because some people who actually worked on Extreme Ghostbusters never heard of Super Ghostbusters. One of the major changes going to Extreme Ghostbusters from the real Ghostbusters, besides the new team, is the animation style. The real Ghostbusters animation had been handled by Deke, but for Extreme, animation was handled by Sony Pictures' animation division, Adelaide Productions. This meant the show had a completely different look, and characters from real Ghostbusters were all redesigned a bit. Though in the show's universe, 10 years had passed since real Ghostbusters, so it made sense that they had changed some. And, well, it wasn't anything as extreme as what had happened to Janine before. I'm really gonna have to watch my use of the word extreme in this video. There's also the possibility Adelaide might not have actually been allowed to use the exact designs from the original Deke show. Something that hints towards this is a statue of Peter Venkman in the firehouse. I don't know why there's a statue of Peter, there just is. Maybe Egon found the real Lorenzo Music Peter Venkman frozen and is working on a way to revive him. Anyway, the one time we get a good look at this Peter statue thing, we can see that it's basically the real Ghostbusters design, but the face has been blurred out. Which would seem to imply there was some dispute over it, or they were just kind of unsure, so tried to play it a little safe. Maurice LaMarche was the only voice actor to reprise his role as a regular on Extreme Ghostbusters, despite Slimer still being on the show.
I'm the guy that stayed on the longest because I held on to Egon all the way through Extreme Ghostbusters. Even on Slimer, in Extreme, we recorded all those shows at night because we had so many sitcom people in the cast, and I know Frank just wasn't interested in working nights. Being the workingest man in all of animation, he just, with his blessing, he said, no, you can recast Slimer, and I won't be upset. And Billy West became Slimer, so I guess I'm the survivor.
So yeah, Fry was Slimer in this series, but Billy West did a pretty damn good job with it, as he sounded very similar. Though Slimer was really scaled back on the show, which was obviously a plus after we'd been put through Slimer and the real Ghostbusters. Slimer actually barely said anything in Extreme. He mostly just made noises, so it was kind of even less than in the original version of real Ghostbusters. He barely even left the firehouse towards the beginning of the series, which I assume was kind of in response to his overexposure in Q5 and the real Slimers. Though originally, it sounds like they were planning to double our Slimer in this series, as they had planned to introduce another pet-like creature with a goblin named Nat. I think we can all be happy that one didn't happen. The new Ghostbusters team is brought together by chance, as they are the only ones, besides Janine, who enroll for Egon's college class on the paranormal.
The average student just isn't enlightened enough to be interested in the paranormal.
Nice turnout. Double the class size I had last semester.
In a world where ghosts are already a proven fact and the Ghostbusters used to frequent the news, you'd think there'd be a little more interest in the subject. Part of the setup to this new series is ghosts and any paranormal activity have quieted down over the last few years, which has led Peter, Ray, and Winston to move on to other jobs, while Egon is the only one staying at the firehouse to maintain the containment unit while teaching at the college. But we again have things taken to the extreme. Damn it! And everyone has apparently completely forgotten about ghosts.
For those of you too young to remember, this is the illustrious Egon Spengler, a charter member of those psychotic vigilantes once known as the Ghostbusters. Back in the 80s, they tried to con the city into believing there were ghosts in order to line their own pockets.
I'm sorry, but at this point in the animated Ghostbusters universe, you can't go back to complete disbelief. Ghosts have just had way too much exposure, and it really wouldn't have hurt the plot to just have had things pick up and then have Egon or circumstances pick a new team from his class, rather than them just being the only ones around to do it. In fact, a more hand-picked team was one of the original ideas for the show, but instead of this being Egon's class, it was going to be Janine's. Which I kind of like a little more, as it would have been something more for Janine to do in this series. Not that Egon ever returns to his classroom after the pilot. While I don't completely dislike Egon having moved on to teaching, it does seem like a bit of something a little too social for Egon. Teaching on the paranormal would be a job I could have seen Ray doing more than Egon. But nah, this series found a much more suitable job for Ray to have moved on to.
Now I'm working with Perpetual Motors.
You mean you've actually built an engine that puts out more energy than it takes to run it?
No. I'm sales manager at Perpetual Motors, the used car lot.
The new team, Kylie Griffin, Garrett Miller, Eduardo Riviera, and Roland Jackson are the Extreme Ghostbusters, which really should have only been the title of the show. They really didn't need to actually be called Extreme Ghostbusters in universe.
Extreme Ghostbusters, we ain't afraid of no ghosts.
One of the main issues with the series is how they throw away the fact this new team is supposedly still in college immediately. I wasn't even sure if they were still going to classes once they became the Ghostbusters until quite a bit into the series when it actually got brought up again. And you know how many times we'll see them at school outside of the pilot? If they are trying to balance school and this new life-threatening job, it should be more of a plot point and should interrupt them at school a bit more than one time. It could have actually been something used to create some more character moments to have the Extreme team discussing trying to have this balance and possibly even having one of them drop out to focus on ghostbusting. But I'm sure they wouldn't want one of the heroes to drop out of school, so it's much easier to just make it a non-issue. And they're all super people that have much better time management than you ever will. The fact they are a new team need to be more of a focus in the show as well, because Egon basically just allows a bunch of kids who are completely unprepared to run around on their own with a bunch of nuclear accelerators on their back. And that turns out about as well as you'd expect. Alright, expect within a children's cartoon. Realistically, they probably would have blown themselves up and then Egon would have had to bust them while crying. But they certainly almost die a lot, and about half the time it's because they seem to not know what the hell they're doing.
Blaster! Hold it. What if by blasting the ghosts, we end up killing Kylie? I think we ought to give it a try. Blaster! It seems awful risky. Maybe we should check with Ego.
Not good!
Let's roast it!
Too risky. Look out!
Nice going, bud. You just saved the Big Apple from a major snack attack.
What are you kids insane?
We're Ghostbusters, dude. It was an honest mistake.
I'm getting a cop.
Come on, give me a clear shot.
Don't even think about it.
Oh, hey, easy, hot dog. No gun, no trap, and no help from you guys.
Eduardo, no! Mirrors reflect proton streams.
Kylie lost her gun.
I did not. Eduardo lost my gun.
Like I said, Kylie lost her gun.
What? Each of those guns has the power of a small nuclear fission reactor.
Egon's role in the show is downed way too much. He need to be more of an active mentor to the group. In fact, a lot of the stronger episodes actually had him being more active with the team.
Yeah, let me do that.
Get out of my way!
I can handle this, Ray!
I am not Ray.
I was just trying to help.
But most of the time, Egon's role was relegated to, "We've got a call."
Well, is it for me?
It's for all of you. We've got a Code 7 abduction.
When it comes to ghostbusting, it's on-the-job experience that counts.
In that case, you'll appreciate the call we just got. We just got a call. Well, you've got another call.
Though how can we expect much more from Egon when he's already at the ripe old age of 39?
Just because my hair is turning gray and I'm getting flabby, my eyesight and hearing have diminished, my metabolic rate has slowed down, and I'm no longer producing brain cells, doesn't mean I'm getting old.
You're what, 50, 55?
I'm 39. I'm a wash-up, a has-been, a failure.
Seriously, guys? You're saying Egon is too old for this shit because he's 39? You know that's younger than Harold Ramis actually was in Ghostbusters 1? You can still have Egon take on the less active leader role without saying he can't physically manage this anymore. Especially when you say he's only 39. Now let's go into each of the characters. Kylie Griffin was voiced by Tara Strong, who's also voiced in some other cartoons that most of you have probably never heard of. I actually ended up really liking Kylie. In fact, I'd say she's my favorite from Extreme.
Why'd you do that, man?
Yeah, you interrupted his beauty sleep.
He needs all the help he can get.
I'm probably not the only one who had that opinion either, as it seems she's the one character from the show that's gotten to do the most afterwards. One of the things that really impressed me about her character is while she is a gothy type person, that's not her defining trait. Like if she just talked all dark, slow, and broody all the time, and didn't show much emotion. Luckily, that's not the case with her at all. She has some moments like that, but she's not stuck there.
It's like he's spelling out a word. I am Eduardo. Get out of my cat!
And she likes cats, so she's gonna be the internet's favorite too, right? Though her cat's name is Pagan, which is probably the silliest on-the-nose gothy thing about her.
Thanks, Pagan.
Thanks, Pagan?
Also, Kylie likes to flip-flop on how pronounced her New York accent is.
Pagan, I'm so glad you're back. That was great the way you came up with that plan to defeat the ghost. Nice going, Dip. I swear, you two are like matter and antimatter.
She and Eduardo have a kind of love-hate relationship with each other.
I could have been street pizza.
Not while I'm around. I thought cats were supposed to be graceful.
And I thought college students were supposed to be bright.
Am I the only guy in the room who reads J.N. Klein?
You read J.N. Klein?
You read?
The show kept flirting with the idea of them getting into a romance, but it would never go anywhere, and it got a bit tiresome once you realized that it wouldn't. But they did have some pretty good banter at times, like when Eduardo finds out that Kylie was an all-star cheerleader when she was in junior high.
So, Kylie, what were you like in junior high?
Same as now. Trouble.
No. Kylie Griffin, 8th grade cheerleader of the year.
Trouble, huh? Oh, yeah. Hey, man, that's the 8th grade cheerleader of the year you're messing with.
Eduardo was voiced by Reno Romano, and he is kind of the Venkman of the group in a couple ways, but not all. He shares some of the more slackerish and woman-seeking traits. He does also have some dry sarcasm, but not to the same degree as Venkman.
The real Ghostbusters.
Yeah, they look real, all right. Real old.
But you must never, under any circumstances, cross the streams.
Why? What'll happen? Another electric shock?
No. Nuclear explosion.
Kiss me, Eduardo. I want you to.
Back off, Eduardo! Why? She's legal.
I'm amazed they got away with that line, honestly, in this series, so props for that one. He is the only one of the Extreme team that had no interest at all in the paranormal at the beginning of the series and only took Egon's class for an
easy A.
He then only got involved with the Ghostbusters stuff to try and impress Kylie and prove he's not a flower.
This ghost business don't play with me.
You might want to take in the flower show at the convention center. I hear they got a special exhibit on daisies.
You calling me a daisy? All right, I'm in.
Eduardo just kind of getting goaded into it makes enough sense to get him involved in the first place, but doesn't really explain why he sticks around after the pilot. When, this wasn't an area he was wanting to focus his studies in originally, so it kind of becoming his career and something he routinely risks his life on could have used a little more focus in the show. Though really, I wish that was something discussed by the characters a lot more than it actually ever is. The only time much lip service is given to their new jobs as Ghostbusters is during these weird opening things where they're just talking over clips from the episode you're about to watch.
Oh man, one of these ghoulies gonna get tired and just go home.
Oh man, when are you gonna get tired of whining?
What? You like risking your neck every day, fighting slime-spewing mortality challenge spooks?
No, but if we don't protect the planet, who will?
Oh, Superman.
Hello, Earth to Eduardo. Superman is a cartoon character.
Yeah, I knew that.
Whatever.
These bits feel like filler because certain episodes ran a little short or something, but they should have been discussions actually held within the show. With Eduardo also being the only one who had no interest in this field, he was probably the least sensible character to give this catchphrase to.
Who do you think you are?
We're scientists. I'm a scientist, man. We're not fans. We're scientists. We're not meteorologists. We're scientists.
Who are those guys?
Scientists, like myself. How'd you know that? I'm a scientist. Make way for a scientist. We can take care of your flying rust bucket. We're scientists. Hey, I'm a scientist.
No, you're not. Being a Ghostbuster in of itself does not make you a scientist. Winston wasn't a scientist, but he was a Ghostbuster. They are not the same thing. The original line this catchphrase is referencing from Peter made sense because, and try to follow me here, he was a scientist.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
Eduardo is a college student. I remember that even if the show doesn't most of the time. But the show does like to point out that Eduardo doesn't have a strong grasp on the science of the situations a lot of the time, making this catchphrase even more asinine. And, you know, even if this was a good catchphrase in the first place, they would have worn it out with the amount of times they had him repeat it.
Eduardo was an average Ghostbuster, but he was a brilliant scientist.
Eduardo also exhibits some of Venkman's more dickheadish traits, with some of the things he says being so over the line, you'd think he'd have to atone for it in some way. But he never really does, besides sort of becoming more fleshed out of a character as the show goes on, meaning it takes quite a while before he feels like anything more than a dick.
Ghosts. Any moron with half a brain cell knows they don't exist. I mean, you gotta be a...
Real slick, bro. Open mouth, insert foot.
Yeah, well, at least I have a foot. One that works to insert.
I do like, though, that this is Garrett's only response to that. It does say something about his character and how he's not really bothered about his legs not working. Garrett was voiced by Jason Marsden and feels a bit like both Ray and Peter at times. He's got Ray's happy-go-lucky attitude, but he's also quite often the mouth of the team.
We came, we saw, we kicked Ghost butt!
What have you done to my messenger?
Oh, you mean Dogface? He's been neutered.
Gary, man, I never thought I'd say this, but you are a sight for sore eyes.
You're not gonna kiss me, are you? Hey, it's Frosty the Idiot Boy.
One of the things that impressed me the most about Garrett's character is him being in a wheelchair wasn't the main focus of his character. It was part of him, but not his defining trait. Though I do have to admit, they do kind of glance over the fact that being in a wheelchair would make some of the tasks he performs a little harder than the show actually makes them out as. Because, yeah, it seems he can roll over pretty much anything with ease when the situation calls for it.
Something's here.
Also, the show tended to like having him getting thrown from his wheelchair a lot, and it tended to be always very close by when this happened, so he could easily get right back in it. There are also some confusing times when the show apparently thought Garrett could hold on to his wheelchair by clenching his butt. In fact, considering how often he got thrown around, you'd think a buckle would have been the first thing this group of scientists would have come up with. One of the unfortunate things about Garrett is, I felt like they tried to overcompensate a bit for his disability by upping his tough guy persona. Now, the fact that Garrett is brave in the face of danger is an admirable quality about him, but the show kind of dialing it up to 11 in a lot of cases would be to the detriment of the plot. Because, you know, if the situation is dangerous, you kind of want to see that reflected through the characters a bit, and all too often Garrett acted like it didn't matter in the slightest.
Either way, Craniac is dust! Shepard, I don't think that word's in my vocabulary.
But it blew him up. That's not supposed to happen.
Hey, results is results.
This stuff isn't budging. If we could just locate its source.
Less talk, more action. You kids, close your eyes!
Looks like somebody wants dessert.
Wait! Let me. That was easy.
And it's not like I don't think that he should have been allowed to try and diffuse tension with humor. In fact, that's one of the things I always loved in real Ghostbusters. But I feel like the show didn't really let the tension build up enough in the first place a lot of the time. Also, when Venkman used to do this, it was still reflected in him that the situation was serious.
Don't say it, Egon. Let me. We're in trouble. Oh boy, are we in trouble.
In some of the stronger episodes of Extreme, Garrett dropped the constant tough guy act and was a little more human. And I wish more episodes had realized you can still have him wisecrack in the face of danger, but you don't need to have him smiling and completely ignoring what the situation actually is constantly.
Garrett, I got you covered, bro.
Roland was voiced by Alfonso Ribeiro. Yes, Carlton from Fresh Prince. And he was the driver! Okay, it wasn't quite that bad, but I really hate having to say this. However, Roland was the character I felt got the shaft the most when it came to characterization in Extreme. We got a few things, like he was a bit of a dork, but never got too far into it besides a few references.
It's a trash compactor. Check it out.
That figures. Even Roland's trash is square.
Think of it like dating. Well, if you dated, I'm gonna kill him.
Go with me.
They dumped a lot of the same traits on Roland as the blander Winston from the later seasons of Real. He's into mechanics and Ecto-1, which is fine, it's just that the show doesn't give him a whole lot else a lot of the time. However, Roland is into science unlike Winston was, and that comes into play once in a while. But a lot of the time, Roland will just be the tech guy, when that's not being given to Egon. I really wish they'd come up with a clear direction for all their characters, because Roland seemed to get stuck in a loop of doing the same thing over and over. There were 3 different episodes where Roland did something that was noisy and it annoyed the rest of the team. He was building something loudly in one, playing the violin in another, and then he got a bit more lazy the next time and just listened to loud music in another. Also, the first time we actually got an episode focused on Roland, he was possessed through most of it to create an evil machine. The next time we got an episode that really focused on him, he was under the spell of a siren for most of it, so again, not in his right mind.
Hello? Would you two stop talking about me like I'm not here?
There were just too many times when they had parts of the plot about Roland, but forgot to actually do anything to grow his character. In the only direct sequel to a real Ghostbusters episode, the Grundle returns and goes after Roland's younger brother because, well, he's a brat. But Roland was blind about that regarding his brother and was convinced he was a good kid, so you'd think he'd have to come to a realization about his misbehaving brother and learn something from it. But nope, it's just dropped. His character never says anything about it.
It's okay, Case. It's all over.
Janine gets her 3rd voice in the animated Ghostbusters universe, provided by Pat Music.
Ghostbusters, please hold. Ghostbusters, please hold. Ghostbusters, please hold. I've always wanted to do that.
To my recollection, you've done that on several occasions.
Oh.
And without a doubt, this is the most medium portrayal of Janine. It's definitely a huge step up from the nicey nice Q5 Janine, as she's got a bit of her personality back, but it's still not quite up to Laura Summers' portrayal. Janine also seemed to be struggling to try and find what her place on this version of the show was a lot of the time. In some of the episodes where Egon is the one answering the phones, she either does nothing at all or doesn't even appear.
Join the Ghostbusters, become a villain.
I feel like they tried to define her a little too much by her attraction to Egon in Extreme, not that it didn't ever lead to some humorous lines at least.
Class, this is Janine Melnitz. Janine was our receptionist.
I like to think that our relationship was more than that.
Of course. Janine also did the accounting and collections.
It gets to the point of ridiculous, though, when we finally get some focus on Janine in this series, and her plot is dating another guy solely to make Egon jealous. And once again, we've gone backwards with them as a couple. Now we're at Janine hitting on Egon and him being oblivious to the point of extreme stupidity.
Think about that next time I ask you to dinner.
Do you think Janine might actually have a crush on me?
Egon might be socially awkward, but he's not a robot. He knows what a kiss is. This, of course, was just played this way to hit the reset button instead of having to deal with what they just did there. I know it might be a little unfair to expect such development of characters on a cartoon from this time, but when they're trying to make you take things a bit more seriously, you're gonna expect a bit more of that type of stuff. So, as far as Janine and Egon are concerned, that kiss never happened, and the next major Janine focus was about her baking cookies and being bad at it.
Yeah, good taste.
Wow, how'd they ever think to use that generic stock plot? When this is a continuation of real Ghostbusters in which we've seen Janine take on a god, she's gone way too far backwards as a character in Extreme. She should have also been someone who could have been a mentor to the new team and gone on jobs with them sometimes. Instead, the show acts like she's barely ever done this before, as we only see her strap on the proton pack a couple of times. And the first time we see her in the Ghostbusters jumpsuit again, it's just at the end of an episode where she and Egon got there after the plot was already over. Then for some bad episode-to-episode continuity, Janine acts like she's never worn a Ghostbusters uniform before and has to grab the gear from that blurred-out Peter statue, and even though she's had several unique colored jumpsuits of her own, she has to grab one of Egon's. When a character already has their own specific jumpsuit, they don't need to wear Egon's. Oh well, as long as they don't make that mistake again. Also, something of note, in the episode where Janine gears up and the episode where the original Ray and two other guys return, they use the original proton packs and traps. For this series, Egon had deemed that the ghosts had gotten too powerful and upgraded the equipment, though we don't really get a specific explanation how they're upgraded. In fact, a lot of the time it seems they are worse, as they have a lot more problems with them running out of power or overheating. Now, I don't mind the look of the new proton pack, but I really don't like the circle trap. I find it rather bland looking compared to the original trap, and it extremely seems impractical. It's much larger now, and only Kylie carries one the majority of the time, with it taking the spot on her back instead of a proton pack. Meaning they only have one trap with them most of the time. Also, how does Kylie's Neutrona wand work without a proton pack? Maybe if the circle trap was built for multiple catches without having to empty it or worry about the ghosts escaping, it would justify it a little more, but that's never given any lip service, and it's just me trying to come up with an explanation for it. As for Kylie's smaller blaster, they showed it connected to a little purse-like pack on her side, which would seem to imply that having to lug around the actual proton pack is pointless, which, is just poking a hole in one of the most major pieces of equipment in the whole show. The only implication of Kylie's smaller blaster is a very bad one, which is that it's weaker than the rest, which is actually implied in one episode.
You've got the girl's gun.
Yeah? Now you do.
I'll cover you. What, that little gun? Get out of here.
Also, they insinuate that carrying the regular proton pack is too heavy for Kylie.
Want me to carry that?
Why? So you can drop it down a sewer?
Hey, I offered.
Why don't you have Janine take it? She never had a problem with it. You know what I expected to pop up somewhere in this series? Samhain is in the intro for the show and even had a toy made of him for the line, which Garrett didn't even get, besides an unreleased prototype. But Samhain never features in the show once. He could have been a good opponent for when the original team returned, but instead we got a kinda dull, blobby tentacle thing. Really? The two-part crossover is one of my major disappointments with the series, and not for the reason you'd expect. I was prepared for the disappointment that I knew was coming, being that it was going to be Dave Coulier's Venkman instead of Lorenzo Music's. But the one I wasn't was that the story that actually brought Peter, Ray, and Winston back just wasn't that strong. I feel like if it had been Samhain, the Boogeyman, or maybe just something connected to Gozer or Vigo, it would have been much more intriguing. Instead, they ended up fighting an entity they couldn't even talk with. The first part of the story was also, again, a bit of a stock plot, with the Extreme team getting jealous of the real team. The returning Ghostbuster that got the most focus was Peter, who I can say about half the time felt like he was written well.
You never change, you nasty green slime machine, you bad goblin. Yuck!
I've heard all about you guys.
And depending on what you've heard, it's all true. Or, I deny everything. This is what you get for letting teenagers take the car.
But the other half of the time, he kind of fell into the stupid, doofy, moronic Peter.
And a one, and a two, and a bobbly. Yeah. We came, we saw, we bowled. Glad you could join the party, Junior.
We got the entity in our sights. Preparing to engage.
I didn't even know they were dating.
For the most part, Ray and Winston didn't really get all that much. In fact, part way through the story, they tried to leave.
Attention passengers. We regret that all south and eastbound departures have been canceled.
Oh, man.
I assume the main reason they tried to take off partway through the story was that whole Peter and Garrett wearing matching shirts thing. Now, speaking of clothing, it also bothered me a lot that Ray, for no reason, wore Egon's old jumpsuit instead of his old beige one. It even had the pink collar like Egon's original one from Real. In Extreme, he wore one, but without a different colored collar, though in this episode, it just kept flipping back and forth. Now let's talk about one of the really nice things about this series, which is how dark some of its stories could actually be. In the episode Deadliners, which was clearly inspired by Hellraiser, you had some Cenobite-like demons killing people.
Flesh. To our specimen, a suit of skin.
To us, sculpting clay.
Promising infinite aesthetic possibility.
Don't touch me! No! No!
Let the procedure begin.
Of course, when people died in Extreme Ghostbusters, they kind of just glanced over it, but for a good while, the show had quite the high body count.
Step into my parlor.
No! It is too late for me.
It's never too late. Thanks, and I'm sorry that you're dead.
These were quite the gruesome designs for this show, and I was really impressed with some of these things they got away with. There was also a Killer Clowns from Outer Space inspired episode called Killjoys, where these evil vampiric clowns eat people. Eduardo even gets turned into one and eats Roland, though of course this gets reversed. But this is a little confusing as they zap the clown out of Eduardo, but none of the other clowns are affected like this, despite the fact that they all must have gotten created by a regular person turning into one as well. Also, none of the other victims return when the clown is caught, just Roland, which is awesome! But it was a little weird that the Extreme Ghostbusters were kind of ignoring a lot of death happening around them, but damn, I would have been fine with that if we didn't suddenly get this partway through the series.
What happened?
Once we trap a ghost, its hold on people is broken. And usually things go back to the way they were.
Once they had mentioned that trapping a ghost was a reset button, they took it to the extreme. Don't say it! It really just got silly though. Everything would just get magically fixed when they caught the ghost, even with damn eyeballs flying back to their owners after one demon had stolen them. And that was a really amazing plot to have in this show until its overly easy solution. There was even one where bones were getting sucked from people's bodies. Again, amazing, though confusing as to how they stayed alive in that state. And having your bones shot back into your body because the baddie got zapped and trapped means you are perfectly fine. Which also leads me to the show's over-reliance on zap and trap being the solution. That was one of the major strengths of the real Ghostbusters, that sometimes they found different ways to deal with the ghosts than this. In the episode Dog Days, there was a dog creature that was also having a strange possession-like effect on regular dogs around the city, but after they caught it...
It's a gate. Full interdimensional breach. Where's my dog?
After talking about how powerful this being was and there barely being any time left in the episode, I really thought the solution was going to be they gave her dog back. But instead, the solution was Roland held a trap behind his back. Really? I've also got to mention what is without a doubt the dumbest thing this series did at any point, which is also in its worst episode, The Ghost Makers, where they forgot what a ghost is. Part of this plot was actually kind of neat, as it involved a being that would shove a person's spirit out of their body, and this happens to Eduardo at first, so his actual disembodied soul has to fly around seeing his body being controlled by something else. But things quickly take a turn for the stupid when Slimer shows up. I know that's a common statement and all, but this time it's not for the usual reasons. There actually could have been a good use for Slimer in this episode because as a ghost, he should have been able to see Eduardo's spirit and that could have led towards him getting help. But instead...
You're dead.
He just told a ghost it was dead. You can't shove a spirit out of its spirit because it's a spirit! This is a plot so stupid and at odds with what a ghost is, I would have expected it in a Q5 Real Ghostbusters episode. Not here. The anti-logic of a ghost dying and having a ghost drove me up the wall trying to watch this one. Now, I don't want to come off like I mostly have negative opinions on the show, but I feel like it didn't just quite live up to its potential. It has a great cast of characters, but instead of exploring them more, they mostly just kind of lightly touched upon a lot of their character elements, and unfortunately fell into a bit of a formulaic format quite often. Egon and Orjanine says they've got a call, Garrett is headstrong, Eduardo is snide about it, Kylie looks at it the most logically, and Roland talks tech. The episode I really felt bucked the system the most was Heart of Darkness. This is one of the best written episodes of Extreme Ghostbusters. The plot involves an old friend of Egon's who also studied the paranormal and ended up being a kind of dark side mirror of Egon. He ended up using his knowledge of ghosts to make them his slaves. This gives the episode some very personal stakes, and Egon actually leads the team through a lot of it like the more active mentor he should have been. The story also resulted in a bittersweet ending for Egon that couldn't just be resolved with a zappin' trap.
I couldn't save him. He let go.
He let go a long time ago, Egon.
And it wasn't just Egon, all of the Extreme team had some stronger character moments in this episode. And I really just wish this had been the norm for the show rather than the exception. Overall, I found my viewing experience of Extreme Ghostbusters kinda got evened out by the highs and lows of the show. And unfortunately, the humor in the show never quite got up to the original incarnation of real Ghostbusters. I'd say humor-wise, it was at its strongest in the two-part pilot, Darkness at Noon. After that, it was mostly filled up with a bunch of lamey-type gags, usually reserved for the episode's abrupt endings. Where the show really shined was how far they took the horror elements at times, and they probably pushed the limits of what they could get away with on this cartoon quite a bit. In fact, I think because they ended up pushing things so far in a lot of the earlier episodes, it made someone come down upon it and make them put in that explanation about things usually fixing themselves once a ghost is trapped. And that resulting lack of consequences was one of the most damaging things to taking any of the plots very seriously. A very obvious problem when being more serious seemed to be one of the main goals of this new show. Extreme Ghostbusters is way above the kiddie crap of the Q5 real Ghostbusters, but it just needed a little bit more of a push to reach the full potential the show really had. It kinda just fell into this middle ground between kiddie stuff and something adults can still enjoy, like the original real Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters. You know, busting makes me feel good. I ain't afraid of no ghost. Woo!
I'm afraid I just blew myself.
There's gotta be a better way to say that.